Former Russian Republic President Kirsan Ilyumzhinov has shared more details about being taken by extraterrestrials on a spacecraft in 1997. Corroboration that Henry Kissinger, Jimmy Carter, Mikhail Gorbachev, and NASA officials knew much more than they publicly admitted about extraterrestrial life. 3i Atlas is transmitting radio signals that are being blocked by a network of 200 SpaceX satellites, according to a high-level NASA official. Jared Isaacman is the new NASA administrator. Trump signed an executive order committing the United States to return to the moon by 2028, building a lunar outpost by 2030, and preparing for the journey to Mars. These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the December 20 edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review, the second last Week in Review for 2025. And it's been a big year, and we definitely are going out with a bang. So many disclosures are happening right now. And what we have to begin with today is some revelations by a former president of a Russian republic who was actually taken on board a UFO and actually talked about it and gave a major interview on Russian TV and was still kept in office by the president of Russia, and also held simultaneously the World's Chess Championship Federation presidency. So Jesse Michaels was able to get this scoop with President Kirsan Ilyumzhinov, who was taken on a craft in 1997. And I first heard of his story back in 2010. That's when the interview on Russian TV was translated and circulated. So that was 15 years ago, and now Jesse Michaels was able to get him to sit down and do an interview in all places, Tirana, Albania. I don't know how that happened, but Jesse Michaels was there interviewing Kirsan Ilyumzhinov, and he gave a lot more details about what happened and the different world leaders that are also briefed or know about extraterrestrials interacting with us. So he really is a major insider, someone that has established friendships with leaders all over the world due to him being both a president of a Russian republic and also being the president of FIDE, which is the World Chess Organization. So let's play the first minute and a half of this promo video that Jesse Michaels put together for Mr. Ilyumzhinov.
You are, to my knowledge, the only leader of a prominent nation who was abducted by aliens and taken up on a spacecraft while you were a sitting president in 1997.
You are constantly using the term abducted. I was invited by them.
The episode you're about to watch is truly historic. I'm here with the great Kirsan Ilyumzhinov. Not only was he president of Kalmykia at the time of his alien visitation, but he was also president of FIDE, the World Chess Federation. He was in Vladimir Putin's inner circle for decades, has met many world leaders, including American presidents and secretaries of state. He knew some notorious figures like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi very well, but also befriended Pope John Paul II. And because he was president of the only European Buddhist Republic of Russia, he also happens to be very close friends to this day with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama.
So over centuries, we have some special relations.
Kirsan describes his entire experience in full detail.
There was something like a translucent pipe glowing, made of some matter. So I went along this tube, and there was something like a planet giving off heat.
In this exclusive interview, we get his chief of staff on record for the first time, saying that he searched Kirsan's penthouse apartment for hours. And then one of the rooms that they had thoroughly scanned, he just walked out of. It's so trippy. Beyond that, we discuss Putin and Trump's knowledge of UFOs and aliens. What do you think the Dalai Lama thinks about UFOs and extraterrestrial?
All right, well, I'll stop it there. I mean, the entire interview goes for well over 2 hours, so it is well worth watching. And you do get an idea of what world leaders think about the extraterrestrial phenomenon and how much is actually being held back by them. Now, here is, I think, a very telling story that appeared in a British tabloid, or actually a British tabloid with a presence in the United States. And this British tabloid talked about betting markets, that there is now 100% odds that Donald Trump will reveal truth about UFOs. And so apparently one of these major betting markets called Polymarket, which is an online platform which can be used to actually predict many major events, that this was giving nearly $6 million was bet, and the odds were close to 100%. They had skyrocketed from 6% to 98% since December 6th. So there you have, I think, a independent source that really just tracks people's perceptions, market confidence, which is really a good indicator of where we're going. And yes, there is very high level confidence now that President Trump will become the disclosure president. So that is something worth looking for. All right, so here's a snippet from the Jesse Michaels interview, where you actually have this Russian Republic president meeting with different world leaders who confirmed the reality of extraterrestrials after his own meeting with them in 1997. So in this snippet, he talks about some of these officials. So let's listen to what he has to say about some of them, particularly people like Henry Kissinger.
It was very interesting back then, not only with NASA, but also with other space research centers in France, Japan, China, and India. After I mentioned that I had a contact, I received many letters and inquiries. At that time, I was the president of the Republic of Kalmykia and the president of the World Chess Federation FIDE, which now includes about 200 countries. I was also a senator and a member of the parliament of the Russian Federation. I visited other countries, both officially and unofficially, and I had many friends in the United States of America. I was friends with Henry Kissinger, met with Jimmy Carter, and with many other presidents and representatives of NASA. I interacted with them back then, in the 1990s. Well, for them, it was a known thing, self-evident. And then, when we talked with the former president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, he also spoke about the fact that there are various civilizations that have made contact with representatives of our Earth. Well, I'm sure you can probably just ask. Just call NASA. I'm sure my visit was registered there somehow. Or maybe not. But a few people from there invited me for a friendly lunch. When I was visiting as a member of the Russian Parliament in the United States Congress, I received a call. Someone introduced themselves, saying, "We're from NASA. We heard about your statement and would like to meet." They invited me for lunch. During the lunch, We had a friendly conversation. But it wasn't just representatives from NASA. There were also leaders from other countries. One of the presidents of a country.
Okay, so he goes on to talk about other world leaders that he knows of that he can't name, one being a current president of a major world country who also is familiar with extraterrestrials. And he also does talk about Henry Kissinger, Jimmy Carter, and so forth in that interview. But certainly it is an eye-opening interview. Again, that's on the Jesse Michaels podcast. Now, this is very interesting. This is a short clip talking about an aerial battle between different UFOs over Nuremberg, Germany in 1561. Now, I mean, that's a long time ago. I mean, we're talking nearly 500 years. But what's very interesting is that I've interviewed a few people who have been taken or served with the German Dark Fleet, or Nachwaffen as they call it. And they say when they do their history of the German SSP, they trace it back not to, say, 1947, the Roswell crash, or 1933, when there was a crash in northern Italy, or the 1920s, when the Vril Society started to have communications with extraterrestrials to build a craft that goes back to the 1500s. And so what happened at that time? So let's watch this little video clip and see if we can get an idea.
The coordinates 49.27 north and 11.5 east fall inside a historically active region of southern Germany tied to unexplained aerial events, Cold War intelligence, and recurring crop formations. The location sits within the same corridor as the 1561 Nuremberg mass sighting. Now, this mass sighting was a mass daylight event witnessed by hundreds of residents of Nuremberg on the morning of April 14, 1561. At dawn, people reported seeing dozens of strange objects in the sky described as spheres, cylinders, crosses, and rod-shaped forms moving rapidly and appearing to collide as if engaged in aerial battle. Some of the objects were said to fall toward the ground outside the city, after which a large black spear or arrow-shaped object reportedly appeared overhead. The event was recorded in a woodcut and pamphlet by Hans Glaser, who framed it as a frightening sign from the heavens.
So that is a fascinating period in history, and this UFO battle was depicted in certain text newspapers from the time. There was also a similar battle, I believe it was over Zurich or Basel. I think it was Basel, Switzerland, a similar UFO battle. But why did the people in the Dark Fleet who served in that organization say that this was an important part of history? Was there some kind of battle that involved future Germans from our period in time who traveled back in time to do battle against some invading extraterrestrial group, and that somehow they associate that battle or victory in that battle with saving the Earth? So did something like that happen? Did time-traveling Germans from our era go back in time to the 1500s and prevent some kind of invasion? I mean, is that the story that they're told? I mean, it is really a fascinating story. And I think as we have more disclosure, we'll learn the truth about these types of claims. Here's talking about Germans and the Dark Fleet and their secret space program. Brad Olson, I did an interview with him where we are talking about his new book, Uncovering Antarctica's Secrets and Hidden History. And he did an excellent job in his book in going over a number of historic documents some of which he has had freshly translated by a Dutch-German researcher. And these documents give details about German U-boats traveling to Antarctica, being able to navigate through these underground rivers into the interior of Antarctica with maps and so forth. And so he's presented some additional evidence that shows that underneath the massive ice sheets of Antarctica is a hidden network of valleys, rivers that would be suitable for underground bases. And so he discusses all of that. And it is definitely well worth taking a look at that book by Brad Olson. I think there are still many secrets buried in Antarctica. The German Dark Fleet, the Nachwaffen, have used Antarctica as a major base of operations. Up until recently, in the last few years, apparently they have relinquished control to American corporations, as far as I'm able to tell. But certainly this gives us a lot more to think about when it comes to Antarctica and its hidden history there. Right, so now here is another speculation from Professor Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer, who's been talking a lot about Three-Eye Atlas, and before that he talked about Oumuamua back in 2017 as being possibly an extraterrestrial spacecraft, and he is really pushing the envelope to get professional astronomers to consider that Three-Eye Atlas is not behaving like a normal comet, and therefore it could be a spacecraft of some kind. So here he's talking about the antitail of Three-Eye Atlas, and that is the part of Three-Eye Atlas that is seen in astronomical pictures, which is pointing towards the sun, because normally for a comet, as the solar wind passes by a comet, it pushes all cometary debris in the direction away from the sun. It's like the solar wind pushes it all away into the outer solar system. But while there's a tail that looks like a normal comet, or some believe it's evidence that this is just a comet, the antitail is what has led to a lot of people speculating that this is something else. Is it a propulsion system of some kind? Well, here Avi Loeb speculates that the antitail may be, quote, a swarm of macroscopic, non-volatile objects that are not affected by the solar radiation pressure on the solar wind. This alternative model is motivated by the latest post-perihelion data on Three-Eye Atlas. So this is after Three-Eye Atlas achieved perihelion, when it was at its closest point towards the sun. That was in late November. And what I find interesting about Loeb's latest speculation is that it matches what a number of remote viewers have been saying about Three-Eye Atlas being accompanied by a fleet of spacecraft, some of which may head on to Earth after it makes its closest approach on December 19, which is actually Friday, today, the day that I'm doing this recording. And so by the time you listen to this, we may know more about whether or not during its closest approach, there was any more photos or evidence that there's a fleet of craft associated with Three-Eye Atlas. And also there's speculation that, or according to NASA insiders, that as Three-Eye Atlas makes its closest approach in March of this year to Jupiter, so there's the kind of trajectory of Three-Eye Atlas as it passes through the inner solar system and then heads on towards Jupiter, where in March it'll make its closest approach, and it's very close to Jupiter. And so the idea here is that this antitail actually has a fleet of craft, and that will also make its way to Jupiter. Now, why is Loeb making these kinds of speculations? Sure, he can say, well, based on the data, which is what he does, he bases it on data. But I personally think that Loeb having a link with the military intelligence world, he was someone that went through Israel's Talpiot program, which is a military intelligence program for intellectually gifted researchers, scientists, and so forth, that he probably is being fed some data, told that, yes, 3i Atlas is actually a spacecraft, and yes, it's got a fleet associated with it. We're not sure what the fleet's going to do, but you put that information out there, and that way people will look and pay attention, and maybe we'll be able to learn more about what's going on. So I don't think Loeb's speculations come purely from scientific curiosity. I think he's being fed some intelligence that influences him to come up with these speculations that he just disguises as scientific speculation on the data. All right, now here is a truly fascinating short clip from Brad Johnson, who I did an interview with, and who actually participated in a webinar with me on December 13. And in this clip, he explains the Russia-Tartaria connection and how Russia is using Tartarian technology, which was widely used back a few centuries ago in China, India, and Germany as well, and why the deep state is trying to take down Russia today. And he believes it's payback for the role Tsarist Russia did, or ancient Tartaria played, in taking down the Khazarian state. And of course, there's a whole lot of literature about the demise of the Khazarian state and how many of those people that were part of this Khazarian state, which converted to Judaism at some point and flooded into Eastern Europe, and then became the supporters of Zionism and immigration to Israel. That all of that is part of why Russia today is being targeted by the deep state. So let's listen to this short extract.
Russia is almost like in the dark. They don't want to tell you anything about that. Because do you know why? Because Russia is the epicenter to the Tartarian civilization. And when you look at the Tartarian civilization, they have still built buildings around with antennas, with domes and everything, and they were able to get free energy. They were able to do telepathic communication through spheres. They had an incredible technology, and Russia used that well up into the early 1900s, before the First World War. Right? So there's a lot to Russia that they want to keep hidden, because if you start looking into its past, you will start looking at Tartarian civilization. Because Tartaria went through Russia, went through China, went through India. Those are kind of like the three big areas. There's also some areas in Europe, like Germany. Germany also had connections with the Tartarian civilization. That's why Hitler wanted to make flying saucers, right? That's why Hitler wanted to make all this advanced technology that really came from Tartarian roots. So again, when you look at Tartaria and Russia, and you saw all the technology there, that would replace all the crappy digital technology we have today, because that's garbage, right? So you're actually looking at something that's scalar based. You're looking at something that lives off the natural universal energy that you can attain. So Russia has been their number one enemy, and they always have been, because Russia went in, slapped them around, and beat them up going back centuries ago. And now they have a grudge towards that Russia basically has to come forward and do it again.
Okay, so that's a fascinating take on the current war between Russia, Ukraine, and why the deep state so desperate to take down Russia and bankrupt it. It's some kind of karmic payback. As for Tartaria, the civilization itself, personally, I think that there's some connection between Tartaria and the inner earth. And when the Tartarian civilization existed, that was probably because there was direct collaboration between surface humanity and the inner earth. And we do know from the work of some German scholars that in the 1500s, this is during the time of the air battles, the UFO battles, so there's a connection to that, that the Vatican, along with the Turkish Empire, banned all sovereigns from communicating with the inner earth. And they basically stopped all trade, they stopped all communications, they blocked the tunnel entrances and so forth. And this may be why the Tartarian civilization kind of like soon after disappeared, because it was always a kind of like outgrowth with the inner earth. So again, fascinating history, and hopefully we learn more in the years ahead as disclosure starts to happen. Now, here's something that Stuart Swerdlow, who also participated in this webinar I did on December 13, and there is a recording available of that. It's on, you can get it on Vimeo or you can get it on Patreon. And 3I Atlas, he was told by a reliable high-level source within NASA that there is a network of 200 SpaceX satellites, and these SpaceX satellites are actually blocking radio communications from 3I Atlas. 3I Atlas is sending something, and this radio communication is being blocked by these SpaceX satellites, or Starlink satellites, I should say, that are associated with the Pentagon, that they're assigned exclusively to work with the Pentagon. And the official program, I believe it's called Starshield, that the Pentagon's Starshield program, which uses 200 of these SpaceX satellites out of the several thousand that are up there. I'm not sure what the exact figure is at the moment, that the Pentagon is using those to block the radio signals from 3I Atlas. And this kind of like is even more intriguing when you look at some of the evidence that the 1977 signal that's called the WOW signal came from roughly the same area or the direction that 3I Atlas came from. So this is even more intriguing. The Sagittarius constellation points to the center of the Milky Way, and that apparently is the direction not just from which the WOW signal came, but also the direction from which 3I Atlas arrived. All right, so here we have the film that is going to be released in June that Steven Spielberg has directed, and it's called Disclosure Day. Very interesting. The actress there, Emily Blunt, she is a UFO enthusiast, but what makes it very interesting is that she has been invited to appear before the US Congress, before a congressional hearing, to talk about disclosure. Now, why is that happening? What has Steven Spielberg been told? What is he going to be releasing? Or how much of the truth is actually going to be released through this film? The fact that the US Congress has actually invited Emily Blunt to participate in this congressional hearing is, to my mind, a sign that this Spielberg movie has been helped or has been approved by those that are in control of the UFO secret, and they're wanting to prepare the public. Now, this could be just another movie promo, clever marketing, and maybe nothing will happen on that particular day. It could be maybe it's kind of like delaying things till June, that, well, we won't wait, nothing's going to happen between now and June, so we've got to wait for Spielberg's movie to come out before we learn more. you can speculate quite a bit, but I think this is definitely getting a lot of people's attention. All right, so here we have the Ross Coulthart, who talks about a refreshingly unbiased article, Why is No One Talking About the Aliens? And he cites an article in Psychology Today that was released by a prominent psychologist. So the author of Why is No One Talking About the Aliens makes some valid points about why the general public doesn't take the time to consider the question of extraterrestrial life, and that's despite growing evidence of its reality as seen in documentaries such as The Age of Disclosure. And the author talks about some of the psychological processes that gets people to kind of like turn away from the possibility that UFOs or UAPs, however you want to call it, are associated with extraterrestrial life. And so the author talks about cognitive dissonance, fear of social stigma, ridicule, that all play a role in preventing public interest. But what I thought was pretty obvious was that the author doesn't seem to be well read when it comes to the contactee literature or the abductee literature. I mean, there's thousands of contactee and abductee stories concerning first-hand interaction with extraterrestrials, and there have been hundreds of books written about these witness testimonies, and they go all the way back to the 1940s. And to me, this is like a blind spot in academia today, or those that are very interested in the UFO issue. And Ross Coulthart, I think, may be part of this kind of like lack of interest in historical cases going all the way back to George Adamski, Howard Menger, and considering them anecdotal, and that these are somehow not worth considering because critics of the day thoroughly debunked them. And so there's no point looking at Adamski, Menger, or, George Van Tassel and so forth, because they were debunked back in the day. Well, no, they were never really debunked at all. They had tons of evidence, but what happened was there was an official campaign to discredit them, and that has been shown. So today, what we need to do is have kind of like a fresh understanding or approach to these historical UFO cases, rather than just ignore them and assume that, well, the problem is just that people are suffering from cognitive dissonance and from ridicule and stigma associated with the question of extraterrestrial life. I think that there's a good reason why we should go back to these historical cases and approach them with a fresh set of eyes. Right. So here is something that David Icke said. Now, this is David Icke. Maybe he's wanting to, well, he's obviously trying to get Joe Rogan to offer to do an interview with him. And David Icke is saying, why would you refuse to interview the man who has been exposing reptilian and other non-human manipulation society for 30 years? If at the same time you claim to have had some kind of related experience. So this is where Joe Rogan went on the Jesse Michaels podcast and talked about his own UFO experience, or a dream, a vivid dream. So let's listen to this.
I could not go back to sleep. It's the only dream I can remember that I couldn't go back to sleep. I don't think I've ever had that happen to me before. Where I woke up at like 3 a.m. or whatever it was, and I was like, I'm up now. Like, there's no way. I laid in bed, I think, for like an hour, and then I just went to the gym. I was like, there's no way I'm going back to sleep. It was very strange. It was very strange because it was like, what is this? It wasn't like a regular dream, like, oh, you're dreaming. It seems like vague and weird and kind of, opaque. It was vivid. It was very strange. And there was these very slender, tall, human-like things that were talking to me. They weren't gray. They were kind of like pinkish, like us. They were, like Caucasian-looking creatures, but they were messing with me. Like they scared me, and they're like, we're just playing around." And so they were doing there was some weird kind of communication telling me to relax. And the environment was very different too. It was very vivid. It was like some sort of a corridor, but it didn't seem normal. It seemed very strange. Like I remember the walls were lit very weird. And I also remember that there was some sort of water and reptilian element to this. Like they were letting me know, like almost like they had barriers that were very sloppy, that were keeping these things out, but they were doing their best. They had people or beings like monitoring and feeding these things and keeping them out. And I was like, what is going on here? And it's like, is this
All right, so there you have Joe Rogan talking about a vivid dream where he sees these human looking extraterrestrial-like beings, and also that that they were guarding something like reptilian entities. Okay, so this is where David Icke kind of like stepped in and said, well, if Joe Rogan is talking about a personal experience that involved reptilians, why aren't you interviewing the guy that first began exposing reptilian and other non-human manipulation of human society for 30 years? So David Icke is kind of like really trying to bait Joe Rogan to do an interview with him, given David's very long history in this, and he's done some excellent work, put out excellent books, and I think made a lot of progress in exposing this reptilian and non-human manipulation of human society going back 30 years. So it would really be great if they did do an interview together. But certainly I am more than happy to host David Icke if Joe Rogan doesn't take him up on his offer to be interviewed. Jared Isaacman has been approved by the US Senate, so he is now the new NASA administrator. That's official. So he's going to be responsible for revamping NASA missions, so that he calls that Project Athena. He's overseeing NASA's manned missions. That's the Artemis programs. And he's also going to be overseeing future Mars missions involving collaboration with SpaceX. And so the question is whether he will at some point play a role in any kind of disclosure announcement involving President Trump and NASA. And as I will shortly discuss, there was an executive order issued by President Trump on December 18, where he talks about some dates. He sets out some dates for the return of humans to the moon, Mars missions, and so forth. And of course, for those of us that have been following the secret space program literature for decades now, we know that humans never left the moon. What left was NASA. NASA was told to leave the moon, NASA being the public program. But the secret space program has been on the moon for decades. So what you have with this announcement of Isaacman becoming a new NASA administrator and this executive order by President Trump is that NASA will, and of course the European Space Agency, the kind of like open source space program, will be returning to the moon. All right, now here's where we get into some controversy, and this is a detailed reply by Jean Charles Moyen and his wife Melanie Charest to accusations leveled against them on the website of Elena Danaan. She wrote an article on her website called Trouble in French Disclosure, where she really castigated Jean Charles and Melanie Charest for behavior that she thought was unethical, lacking in integrity, and so forth. And because she has a big platform, a lot of supporters, Jean Charles doesn't really have much of a platform in which to respond to such accusations. It's taken them about a year to kind of deal with this, but they did eventually put together a response. It's 28 pages with lots of details about what happened. Now, I mean, this is where we get into, he said this, she said that. And of course, I have my own issues with Elena Danaan, but I don't want to get into that. What I did want to just briefly comment on was something that was in this 28-page response by Jean Charles, and this concerns what he had found, or what he said was basically the removal of evidence corroborating his testimony. I think that's very important. And so what he is referring to here in this 28-page document, and if we go to page 15 or page 16, he talks about something that Alex Collier said that was discussed in a roundtable discussion featuring Danny Henderson, Elena Danaan, Dan Willis, Chris O'Connor, Tony Rodriguez, Jean Charles, and me, and that we were part of this roundtable discussion. And I remember this being discussed, and it was a very interesting statement from Alex Collier, who's often given the honorific Sir Alex Collier. Not that he's bowed before the Queen in any way, but just the esteem that many within the contactee community have for Alex. Now, this is where he talks about something that I thought was very, very significant, and it directly involved Jean Charles Moyen. Alex says, "I'll just say this. Remember when I told the story about being with Mornay, that's Alex's Andromedan contactee, my extraterrestrial contacts since childhood, they found human bodies floating in space. Remember that?" Yes. Danny Henderson, yes, of course. And Alex Collier says, Jean Charles helped recover the bodies from Mornay's ship, and this was done near Solaris. I don't know if you knew this, but this is the first time I've mentioned this name today. We gave the bodies to them. We sent the bodies back to Solaris. That would explain why there were different uniforms, because it was an American and French ship. So that's very interesting information, isn't it? So here you have Alex Collier saying that Jean Charles Moyen was serving with this joint US-French secret space program. He was serving on the Solaris, and he boarded the mothership that Mornay was based on, and collected these human bodies that had been found in space, and taken them back to the Solaris. So this is very critical information, and it really does show that Jean Charles Moyen has a lot of credibility, because you have independent sources like Alex Collier saying that, yes, Mornay did tell me about this person, Jean Charles, being involved in the retrieval of human bodies that were being taken to this French American secret space program ship. Now, what Jean Charles does here is that he points out that this roundtable discussion was deleted. And that was at the behest of Elena Danaan, and that she has done similar things for other critical events, such as she being a witness to Jean Charles before he teleported into a space ark in Mount Fuji, and also being a witness to Jean Charles teleporting into a space ark in Antarctica. And I remember both of those incidents, and Elena saying that she was sent there by the Galactic Federation to be a witness to Jean Charles doing this. Well, after her falling out with Jean Charles, she removed all of that from her websites and has been rewriting history to really discredit Jean Charles and make out that he is just a liar and fabricator. And I find that to be so unprofessional, so disingenuous, that it really needs to be pointed out that if you do stuff like that, if you try and rewrite history, if you remove evidence of other people's genuine contacts, what does that say about you if you're willing to stoop to that level? And so I certainly do not approve of what she did, and I think Jean Charles deserves to be supported for this egregious behavior that was leveled against him. Because, I mean, you can choose to be for or against him in this dispute with Elena Danaan on other issues, but when it comes to evidence, when it comes to like someone saying, yes, I saw Jean Charles in Antarctica, I saw him in Tokyo, and he was going in to do this and then you remove all of that, that's evidence, and you're removing it, and then you're I think that really does rebound on you. So that is a 38-page document, and you can read that. I have the links on my website where you can, sorry, it's a 28-page document, and you can read all about that and get Jean Charles' word for exactly what happened in this dispute between his wife Melanie and Elena Danaan. Right, here's an interview I did with Praveen Mohan, who is an expert on ancient temples and Vimanas and the return of the gods. So he talks about these ancient Hindu temples in Asia that he has personally visited, the architecture that's found on them, the design of them to look like spacecraft. So this is he really does kind of like open up this ancient connection between Vedic India and these gods or these ancient extraterrestrials who visited humanity. All right, now here is, I thought, a very intriguing piece of news that just came out. Now, according to Devin Nunes, there has been an acquisition by the Trump media group of a major company, important company called Tri-Alpha Energy. And Tri-Alpha Energy has been doing cold or cool fusion for some time in terms of trying to research the feasibility of that as a energy source, cool fusion or cold fusion. They don't need helium-3 from the moon. They use boron-11, which is common. A neutronic fusion means no neutrons, also known as no heat or radiation, no steam cycle. So all of that directly converts to electricity, and apparently this is something that the Trump media group has acquired. So let's listen to what Devin Nunes has to say.
Nuclear fusion has always been there. It really is the holy grail. It's like the sun. Right. But we haven't been able to harness that yet. It just hasn't, the technology, the science. But that's the difference between TAE and all the other nuclear companies out there around the world. This is the one that won't rely on rare earth elements, won't have to rely on a bunch of magnets, and it's the only company that's actually built something. That's what we were most impressed with, was not just all the scientists and all the engineers that had worked with private funding, all private funding, I must say. And now what they're looking to do is they need a way to get in and access the public markets. We provide that opportunity for them to access the public markets. And I would just encourage everyone to actually look at this company. I think when you look around the country, look around the world, This is the world's premier nuclear fusion company without question. And when we talk at Trump Media and Technology Group, what do we want to do? We want to acquire crown jewel assets. This is a crown jewel asset that could change the world. Nuclear.
Now that's very interesting that Devin Nunes is saying that he refers to the Trump Media and Technology Group. So it's not just Trump setting up a social media like Truth, the Truth social media, but also acquiring companies that come up with some new electricity production technologies. And this is very, very interesting that this kind of a cold fusion technology is considered to be a crown jewel for the Trump Media and Technology Group. So I suspect that any announcement from Donald Trump concerning UFOs, extraterrestrial life, that's going to open the door to these kinds of companies receiving a lot of funding, because then it'll prove. Because I mean, that's really the thing. A lot of scientists today will say, well, we don't believe extraterrestrials are visiting Earth because the speed of light is an absolute maximum, and the energy it would take to get from, say, Alpha Centauri to Earth would make it unfeasible for extraterrestrials to visit us. But if all of a sudden the extraterrestrial issue is acknowledged to be real, then the energy systems that they use to be able to get here, whether it's through some kind of superluminal propulsion system or using some kind of Stargate portal system, both of which require exotic energy sources, then that would mean scientists would suddenly say, well, yeah, we've got to look at these alternative energy sources because that's how the extraterrestrials do it. So are they using some kind of cold fusion to get here? So very, very significant development here. All right, so this is an executive order signed on Thursday by President Trump, committing the United States to the return to the moon by 2028, to build a lunar outpost by 2030, and prepare for the journey to Mars. So this, of course, is all going to be done under Jared Isaacman, or at least up until the end of the up until the end of the current Trump administration, which will be January 2029. Isaacman will be the NASA administrator, and he will be overseeing this. And it's interesting that they're going to build a moon base by 2030 and prepare for the journey to Mars. Now, all of these things, as I've said, have already been done by secret space programs. But as far as the public space program is concerned, these are yet to be done. And of course, people question whether or not whether Americans did get to the moon in the 1970s. Personally, I think the idea that the moon landings in the 1970s were hoaxed overlooks something very important, that elements were hoaxed, not the whole thing. That they wanted to show that humans or Americans reached the moon, but they didn't want to show what the astronauts really saw. So they hoaxed some of it because, yes, Americans did get to the moon, and they could film or show some of that, but they didn't want to show these huge spacecraft up there with reptilians and other non-humans kind of like looking at the astronauts close up and kind of like doing all sorts of threatening maneuvers. They didn't want to show that to the public. So yeah, the actual moon landing was hoaxed, but not because they wanted to deceive the public about Americans getting there. They wanted to deceive the public to make Americans think, or the world think, that there was nothing on the moon other than just a bunch of rocks that were going to be brought back, and that was it. All right, so now this takes me to the next monthly briefing, which is going to be held on January 3rd. And that monthly briefing will be made available for all my Solar Patron members and above. all of those people who register for the second or third tier, they get this briefing for free. That'll be part of their membership, and I want to thank them and all my Patreon members for your support, because it really does make a great difference for keeping me there on the airways. I can only produce all of these videos every week for free because we have Patreon members who support us, and because we have webinars or monthly briefings that people attend. You don't have to be a Patreon member to attend. You can actually just pay a flat fee and through Crowdcast and watch this. And so what we're going to be doing is, in this monthly briefing, I'll be looking at what lies ahead for 2026, just giving you a rundown on some of the most popular predictions for what's coming, giving you an idea of what to expect, and of course the latest geopolitical events, whether it's concerning Three Eye Atlas, whether it's concerning the Ukraine-Russia war or the Israel-Hamas war, all from the perspective of exopolitics, where we get to see what's really driving these conflicts. So I want to thank you for watching this. Really appreciate your support, and I look forward to seeing you next week, which will be the last weekly briefing for 2025. So thank you and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.